The scripture today is from Luke chapter 16, verses 10 to 13 in the Common English Bible. Whoever is faithful with little is also faithful with much, and the one who is dishonest with little is also dishonest with much. If you haven't been faithful with worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? If you haven't been faithful with someone else's property, who will give you your own? No household servant can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be loyal to the one and have contempt for the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. And this is from Luke chapter 16, verse 9, the King James Version. And I say to you, make to yourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness, that when ye fail, they may receive you into everlasting habitations.
We are in the middle of a short 3-part stewardship worship series that draws from the wisdom of John Wesley, the founder of Methodism. Last week, we studied Wesley's sermon entitled The More Excellent Way, which had us looking inward at our own sleep patterns, our prayer life, our labors, our diet, and how we have conversation with one another, all to help us along the way to what the Apostle Paul calls in Corinthians, the more excellent way. And of course, we also learned the why of taking care of ourselves in this way. And that was so that we could be useful to other Christians and to those who do not yet believe. In other words, we want to be good witnesses, good examples for others along the journey of faith. Today, we are studying Wesley's sermon entitled The Use of Money. Records show that Wesley preached on Luke chapter 16, verse 9, at least 27 times between 1741 and 1758, sometimes under the title of The Mammon of Unrighteousness. This indicates that this topic was a constant concern and a perplexing problem in his day. A problem it was indeed. You see, in Wesley's time, capitalism had resulted in a steady accumulation of venture capital, which led to a shocking contrast between the grand lifestyle of the newly rich and the grinding misery of the perpetually poor. We're on a similar trajectory here in the United States. In my lifetime, the percentage of people in the middle class has declined from 61 to 50%, while the number of people in the upper income range has increased from 14 to 21%, while the number of people in the lowest income range increased from 25 to 29%. We know finances are a source of stress, and it is the most common source of arguments in relationships. So just as in Wesley's day, money remains a constant concern and a perplexing problem for those of us in the 21st century. Wesley was often preaching to the poor in England, and while he did not see money itself as evil, he did advocate for its use within the context of the greatest commandment, which is to love God and to love neighbor. I think that's useful framework as we begin this study. Jesus' parable about stewardship from Luke 16 serves as the foundation for Wesley's sermon on the use of money. The parable starts out like this. A certain rich man heard that his household manager was wasting his estate. He called the manager in and said to him, "What is this I hear about you? Give me a report of your administration, because you can no longer serve as my manager." Some Bibles use the title the shrewd manager for this parable because the household manager proceeds to contact everyone who was indebted to his boss, the rich man. And the manager then had them lower the amount owed on their contracts. The manager knew that this would benefit himself once he was out of a job, because all of those people then would feel like they owed him a favor. The rich man commended the manager for his clever thinking, but was critical of how he handled the property that was not his. You see, he lowered debt that was not his to lower. And that leads to this well-known Bible verse: whoever is faithful with little is also faithful with much, while whoever is dishonest with little is also dishonest with much. Friends, I don't really know what Judgment Day is going to look like, but what if God calls us into account for how we handled our resources, how we handled our time, how we handled our talents, and yes, how we handled our finances? Wesley was pretty clear that the fault does not lie in the money, but in them that use it. Hear that again. The fault does not lie in the money, but in them that use it. Fortunately for us, this implies that something can be done in order to build a healthier relationship with money. And of course, Wesley has some ideas about how to accomplish this. And while it might not be easy to do, he calls them 3 plain rules. The first rule is this: gain all you can. It is our bounden duty to do this, he says. And we get a sense of Wesley's values and where he is coming from as we read further. We ought to gain all we can without buying gold too dear, without paying more for it than it is worth, he explains. But it is also certain that we ought not gain money at the expense of life, nor at the expense of our health. Neither should we begin or continue in any business which necessarily deprives us of proper seasons for food and sleep in such a proportion as our nature requires. He then specifies about some known dangers of his day, like working with arsenic or other equally hurtful materials, or breathing in air that is full of toxins. In addition to this, he says that we are to gain all we can without hurting our mind any more than our body. So Wesley was really concerned that people not work in environments that threaten their life or physical or emotional health. Something worth noting is that Wesley urges us all to consider for ourselves what our own limits may be. A job you might do is fine for you and your body, but too strenuous for mine, or vice versa. None here can determine for another, he says, but every man must judge for himself and abstain from whatever he in particular finds to be hurtful to his soul. And if you are already engaged in such an employ, Wesley suggests, we should exchange it as soon as possible for some which, if it lessen our gain, will, however, not lessen our health. And true to Wesley's aim toward the greatest commandment, he also specified that we are to gain all we can without hurting our neighbor, in their body or in their soul. To explain this, Wesley points mostly to actions that would take advantage of a neighbor's land or their house or workmen, or selling goods below the market price, presuming that would undercut the ability to make a sale. Gain all you can by honest industry, Wesley says, and use all possible diligence in your calling. So Wesley had an eye toward healthy work-life balance and a clear ethic about gaining income. Well, the second rule is this: save all you can. Wesley cautioned, don't waste what you have in idle expenses, in gratifying the desires of the flesh, furnishings, elaborate diets, or in expensive apparel. And he was talking about this in relation to both you and your children, your whole household. Now, I know this is quite difficult. Peer pressure to wear name brand clothes was a real tension in my family when I was a teenager. Oh, how I wanted a pair of Gloria Vanderbilt blue jeans. Wesley believed these kinds of things led to pride or lust, vanity, and even foolish or hurtful desires. He wouldn't want us to seek status or accolades from others. Instead, he urged us to be content with the honor that cometh from God. During part of my seminary education, I lived on campus in student housing. Each unit was about 400 square feet, and I moved there from a house. So I had downsized quite a bit. In that season of my life, I was trying really hard to be careful with my finances. Every time I went shopping, I tried to go with a saving mindset. When I saw something that I thought I wanted to buy, I would ask myself, what do I want more right now? This item or my money? And then I would ask myself, what about a month from now? Will I be glad that I have this item, or will I wish that I had my money? Well, then I would leave that item on the shelf, and I would continue my shopping while reflecting on these questions. If I decided the item was of lasting use to me, then I would pick it up before checking out. Otherwise, I would be pleased instead to keep my money in my pocket. This process may seem a little silly, but it did save me a surprising amount of money during a time when money was tight, while also staying comfortably in my small efficiency apartment without it getting too cluttered with additional things. So the first rule is to gain all you can, while the second rule is to save all you can. Now the third rule is this, to give all you can. Wesley suggested that to not use your money is effectively to throw it away. He explains further, saying that you are not here as a proprietor, but as a steward. Because of this, the one who placed you here entrusted you for a season with goods of various kinds as the steward of them, while God is still the proprietor. So he would say that your soul and your body are not your own, but God's. The same is true of your possessions and your finances. And not only that, but God is depending on us to be good stewards of them all. By all means, Wesley clarifies, provide the things that are needed for you and your family, food to eat, clothes to wear, whatever is modestly needed for your health and your strength. And beyond that, Wesley urges us to care for others that are in the household of faith. And beyond that, to do good unto all men. 30 years after first writing this sermon, Wesley expressed some disappointments in how his third rule wasn't being followed. Of the 3 rules which are laid down, he wrote, you may find many that observe the first rule, namely, gain all you can. You may find a few that observe the next rule, save all you can. But how many have you found that observe the third rule, give all you can? Have you reason to believe that 500 of these are to be found among 50,000 Methodists? And yet nothing can be more plain than that all who observe the first rules without the third will be twofold more the children of hell than ever they were before. So this is surely something those in Wesley's day struggled with, and the same may be said for today. Perhaps it's appropriate to acknowledge here that Wesley practiced what he preached. He wasn't asking something of us that he wasn't willing to do himself. As a student at Oxford, he lived on 28 pounds a year. As his earnings increased to 30 and eventually to 120 pounds annually, he continued to live on that same 28 pounds while giving all the rest of his earnings away. He told people that if at his death he had more than 10 pounds in his possession, they could call him a robber. Sure enough, what remained when Wesley died was a few assorted coins in his pockets and dresser drawers. Wesley's own words are fitting as we come to an end. Money is an excellent gift of God, answering the noblest ends. In the hands of his children, it is food for the hungry, drink for the thirsty, raiment for the naked. It gives to the traveler and the stranger where to lay his head. By it, we may supply the place of a husband to the widow and of a father for the fatherless. We may be a defense for the oppressed, a means of health to the sick, of ease to them that are in pain. It may be as eyes to the blind as feet to the lame, yea, a lifter up from the gates of death. Wesley understood giving to be rooted in God's very being. And when we participate in giving of what we have been entrusted with, we are fulfilling the role of steward that God has placed us in. Financial matters are among some of the most difficult to manage. But what if we see money as an excellent gift of God, to be used for the relief of those who are oppressed or are in pain? What if we see money as an excellent gift of God? What if we all subscribe to Wesley's 3 plain rules: to earn all you can, to save all you can, and to give all you can? Wouldn't the world be something to see if this were truly the case? Such a sight might be just what Christ had in mind when he was preaching the parable of the shrewd manager. And you and I now have the choice in how we manage the resources we've been given to steward in our lifetime. May we be faithful in our efforts. Amen.